Yes, hello once again. Welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. And as you know, we have been off the air for the last 2 or 3 weeks, but still during that time we've been very busy crisscrossing the country, filming more of those old school dirt bike projects to feature here on my channel. So look out for many more of those old vintage classics coming soon to CDB TV. So let's crack on and get down to business. Now this particular bike that we're going to feature next is another one of those very nice machines that we filmed during my paddock walkabout at the recent Kendal Classic Revival Scramble in April of 2023. And we did say at that time that we would take a much more detailed look at this bike, so that's exactly what we're going to do now. So let's jump straight into that video and take a look at Robin Chadwick's 1965 Rickman Metisse Triumph 500. Okay, so as I said, this was another one of the very nice looking bikes that I came across during my wanderings around the racing paddock at the 2023 Kendal Classic Revival Scramble. And this bike here belonged to Robin Chadwick, and this is Robin's lovely 1965 Rickman Metisse 500 Triumph that was soon to take part in that Revival Scramble event. Now, as British-made old school scramblers go, these Rickman bikes are the staple diet of many riders who race in the pre-68 or pre-65 motocross events, and the two brothers of Don and Derek Rickman certainly had a huge appreciation of Rickman followers when they designed these frame kits back in the early 1960s, because not only could you fit these twin-cylinder Triumph motors into their chassis, but also a multitude of other and different makes and models of two-stroke or four-stroke engines. Now, our particular Robin Chadwick bike is still essentially a 1965 Rickman chassis with all of the usual fiberglass fuel tank and body panels bolted onto it, but it does have slightly different front and rear suspension than you would normally find on these 1960s bikes, and it also has different top and bottom triple clamps as well, which we'll get to later in the video. But despite those parts that I've just mentioned, it's still quite a stunning looking little motorcycle. Now, when it comes to these Rickman chassis, I'm sure that you're already aware that these frames were all immaculately engineered, with of course the frame being used as an oil storage tank for the motor, where the engine oil was filled through this little filler plug, and then it was pumped around the engine and then back into the frame. And they were of course all chrome plated as well, and you can see that Robin's also added this quite nice looking alloy engine guard to the frame just to help protect it from any stones or debris that would be thrown up from the racetrack. And the rear swing arm again was all part of the frame kit when you ordered up a chassis from Rickman. Then usually it was just a job of finding all of the other bits and pieces like the engine, the front and rear suspensions and wheels, etc. To complete your machine. But without doubt, these frames were certainly well engineered and very high quality. And so as we move on to our Rickman framed power plant, which is unmistakably a twin-cylinder 500 Triumph 4-stroke motor, which again is a hugely popular choice for these British-made frame kits, and some owners do opt to fit the bigger 650 twin-cylinder engines on these chassis, although Robin did tell me that he thinks that these 500s are a much better choice than the bigger Triumph motors, because they're a lot easier to start, and they seem to suit the lightweight Rickman chassis much better in terms of its handling and power output. But certainly an absolute belter of an engine, these Triumph twins, with the sound and the power to match, especially when you hear it through those straight through header pipes, which of course have no mufflers or tailpipes to quieten down that quite nice sound from the twin cylinder 4-stroke motor. And in my opinion, having no tailpipes on these engines certainly makes the motor sound and breathe better, and it also helps to keep the overall weight of the bike to a respectable level. Now, tucked up in front of this airbox is not the usual Amel monoblock or concentric carburetor that you usually find on these old Triumph engines. This time round, Robin's fitted a much more modern Mikuni in its place, which is a bit more tunable than the older Amel originals. And so onto the transmission side of the bike, which is a 4-speed transmission, which I expect will be a Triumph gearbox, because this is a unit construction with the engine. But again, you can see that this gear change mechanism isn't your usual stock shifting system found on normal Triumph gearboxes, because Robin's bike has had this upgraded linkage system put on to his bike, where through a series of levers and bushes and bearings, the movement of the gear lever is much slicker and more precise than the original Triumph fitting. And in its way, this new system is a kind of variation to the new type of shifter mechanism that was supplied by Peter Gerrard, who makes a similar style shifter for the old CZ 2-stroke bikes. But I have to say that this is the very first time I've seen one of these new linkage systems on a British-made Triumph. But also another nice little addition to this Rickman frame is these footrest hangers fixed again onto the bottom chassis rails, but the actual footrests are again much better quality and much wider than the originals, which will give the rider's feet much more support and grip than those stock Rickman factory fittings. But as a choice of power plant to drive along your Rickman Metisse chassis, these twin-cylinder Triumph motors are certainly without doubt powerful, and if they're maintained correctly, very reliable as well. And although these are an old school design from around the 1960s, their legacy and pedigree are certainly without question, and that's the reason why that these engines are still in use even to this day. Now, usually the most popular choice of front suspensions fitted to these Rickman frames is normally an Italian pair of Seriani top and bottom triple clamps and stanchions, although these high quality items that are bolted onto Robin's bike are all engineered by Mark Hardy from Birkenhead in the UK, and these nicely sculpted bar clamps as well are also more of Mark's handiwork. And so as we move on to the forks on our Rickman chassis, which are those top quality REH classic suspension units, but I do remember Robin telling me on the day that the stanchions inside are more of Mark Hardy's metal shaping skills. But if you're in the market for a nice pair of high quality forks for your old classic dirt bike, then they certainly don't come any better than these REH suspension units, which are often used by many of the top riders in the UK British Classic Championship. So I expect that's a reason that the likes of Chris Chell and many others use them, because if you're a top rider at the head of your game, then you're going to want to fit the best parts available onto your bike. Now again, at the front end of our Triumph Metisse, you could basically have any make or model of front hub that you'd like, because these Rickmans are still essentially a kit kind of machine. So this time round, Robin's opted to use a front hub from an Armstrong motorcycle, which appears to suit his needs almost perfectly, and this old school drum brake should have just about enough stopping power to bring our Rickman Triumph to a halt. But in comparison to the front, the rear hub and brake are your original Rickman items, which once again are very good quality, and these can be ordered, of course, as part of your frame kit. And this old drum brake stopper also does have plenty of friction to slow down or even bring to a stop our Rickman racer whenever it's required. So moving on to the back end of our Robin Chadwick bike, which just like the front end, you can bolt on whichever make, model or configuration of rear suspensions that you can afford. And as you can see, Robin's going for a set of these Dutch-made Riger classic shocks, which by all accounts are quite good units, because I've seen quite a few of these kind of twin shock vintage racers using them. So they must have decent quality and performance going by their popularity with the classic and vintage racing fraternity. Now the bike's fuel tank is of course made of fiberglass, as is traditional with all of these Rickman frame kits, and you can have the tank and the side panels and also the front and rear mudguard and tail cone painted in whichever colour of the rainbow that takes your fancy. So not only can the chassis take the motor of your choice, you can also have the entire bike colour coordinated to your own personal requirements. So again, there is a multitude of different parameters available when it comes to building one of these Rickman motorcycles. And this lovely red colour that Robin's chosen certainly suits the machine. So as we move on to the bike's control centre, we have a pair of relatively modern Renthal handlebars and a period set of alloy Magura levers and their rubber lever covers, just to try and help keep dust and dirt from entering the ends of the cables and the lever pivots. But again, these parts are all very good quality items. But it's this throttle gasser's job to control all of the many horses just waiting to be unleashed from that 500 twin Triumph motor. So certainly a steady hand is required to keep that Rickman rear wheel from digging deep trenches and throwing big roosters onto the rest of the chasing pack. Although, as I mentioned earlier, these Rickman Scramblers are still hugely popular with the pre-65 and pre-68 Scrambles riders, and that's all mainly down to the superb engineering of the Rickman brothers, who drew up the plans for these frame kits way back in the early 1960s. And it's because the frames are so well made in the choice of engines, whether it be one of these Triumph twins or even a small single two-stroke motor, is what makes them so appealing to buyers. Because basically, if you can think it up, then the chances are Rickman can provide a chassis to suit. But in my personal opinion, when you look at these Rickman frames, they look more or less made for these Triumph twin motors, because there's certainly something about them that just makes this motorcycle look right. And let's face it, who wouldn't want this little beauty of Robin Chadwick's sitting in their garage or workshop, or even better still, take it for a few laps around the racetrack. So there you have it, a nice looking British classic. That's Robin Chadwick's 1965 Rickman Triumph 500. But once again, thanks for watching CDB TV, and look out for more classic machines coming soon to my YouTube channel.